The night cast its shadow over the ancient manor in Wiltshire, a place long tied to the mysterious past of Queen Camilla. The sky was heavy, clouds hung thick, and the wind howled against the cold iron fences. Outside, security was unusually tight, floodlights beaming straight down into the hidden basement, creating a scene of tension unlike anything the British royal family had ever witnessed. Amid this heavy atmosphere, Prince William appeared without warning, his face stern, his eyes cold. He issued a sharp command: search the entire basement, a direct order with no precedent, shocking not only the guards but also the witnesses present. After all, the idea of a senior royal demanding a search of Camilla's private residence was something no one could have imagined. The old wooden basement door creaked open, its hinges screaming in protest. In the dim light, the search team uncovered a box thick with the dust of time. As the lid was pried open, the room seemed to suffocate. Inside lay a single shoe, its color, design, every detail matching the very pair Princess Diana had worn on that fateful night in Paris. At that instant, the world seemed to freeze. Eyes widened, whispers spread. Was this nothing more than a cruel coincidence? Or had Camilla hidden a secret for nearly 3 decades? What do you think? Mere chance? Or the first piece of an unspeakable plot? And so, on that bleak September night in 2025 at precisely 10:30 p.m., the quiet countryside of Wiltshire became the epicenter of an unprecedented royal event. A land usually filled only with the rustle of wind through fields and the call of owls was suddenly cloaked in tension. Mill House, the manor forever linked with Camilla, once her private retreat before her marriage to Charles, and still her sanctuary long after entering palace life, was now bathed in searing floodlights. Security lined the estate, black cars filled the drive. It looked less like a royal residence and more like a covert intelligence operation. Behind it all stood Prince William. His decision left everyone stunned. The heir to the throne, personally ordering a raid on his stepmother's home, bold, unprecedented, and politically explosive. Yet William was no impulsive man. He had received intelligence, a secret tip-off, claiming that inside Mill House's basement were items directly connected to Diana's death. The message was a knife to the heart of the eldest son of the woman once called the Queen of Hearts. Mill House was no ordinary property. Built on an estate of over 117 hectares, it resembled a private fortress, grand and yet shrouded in secrecy. It boasted 15 lavish rooms and, more importantly, 4 vast basements rumored to be as deep and twisting as a hidden labyrinth. After Camilla acquired it, she poured nearly £850,000 into renovations, with much of it spent on state-of-the-art security, cameras, motion sensors, bulletproof doors, and electronic locks. A private home, yet protected almost like a military compound. Whispers suggested it was more than just a retreat. William knew this. He knew the risks of breaking through not only the walls of security, but also the unwritten codes of the monarchy. But this was no idle rumor. Alongside the tip came leaked documents described as classified reports. Though their authenticity had not been fully verified, their content was convincing enough for William to believe that Mill House concealed something the royal family had ignored or buried for nearly 3 decades. And if unearthed, it could rewrite the world's understanding of Diana's tragic end in Paris's Alma Tunnel in 1997. That night, silence fell as William's convoy rolled into the estate. His closest guards fanned out, sealing every exit. From above, cold white-blue beams of light cut down into the earth, focused on the basement where William believed the truth waited in the dark. Dogs barked, radios crackled, the tension tightening like a noose. Locals, long accustomed to the peace of their village, could only watch from a distance, whispering of a raid they never thought possible on the quiet fields of Wiltshire. In William's mind, memories of his mother surged back. He remembered her warm smile, the tears at her funeral, and the whispers from the public that Diana's death was never just an accident. For years, he had suppressed his doubts, choosing silence to preserve the stability of the family. But in this moment, standing before Mill House, William knew there was no turning back. He needed answers, not only for himself, but for the millions who still believed the truth had been buried. Every detail of the operation had been carefully documented. The search began precisely at 10:30 p.m., a time chosen to avoid public attention, yet late enough to guarantee complete surprise. The estate's security systems were disabled in minutes. Lock experts, under William's direct supervision, moved one by one toward the basement entrances. The air was so tense that even the metallic clink of tools against steel sent shivers down spines. Then, as a team worked at the reinforced door to the third basement, William suddenly signaled them to stop. From his coat, he pulled out a worn file, his eyes drilling into the faded pages. These were the secret reports he had received, documents that mapped out the underground structure of Ray Mill House with startling precision, even circling in red a suspicious zone deep below. The eerie alignment between the papers and the reality before him only strengthened William's belief that he was on the right trail. No one present dared utter a word. They knew every move was being recorded, that this night might one day be written into history. The only sounds were pounding hearts and hurried breaths, each step bringing them closer to a secret long concealed. And then, at last, the final heavy door groaned open, revealing a yawning darkness that seemed to swallow the light whole. But what had convinced William that this basement held something so dreadful? The answer lay in a chain of leaked classified reports. 11:10 p.m. The iron door to the Ray Mill House basement finally gave a sharp metallic clack. The sound echoed through the still Wiltshire night like the opening shot of an impending storm. Under William's direct command, the security team pushed the door ajar. A rush of damp, stale air, thick with the scent of time, poured out, forcing several men to cover their noses. But none stepped back. Every eye was fixed on the darkness ahead, where decades of secrecy were about to be exposed. Torch beams swept across dust-covered walls, over wooden crates and rusted shelves stacked with cardboard boxes. The basement was far larger than expected, a labyrinth beneath the ground, corridors branching and echoing with each footstep. The team moved methodically, splitting into groups to search, marking every discovery. At first, the finds were meaningless. Dozens of old boxes were carried out. Land deeds, contracts, forgotten household items, yellowed papers, moth-eaten fabric, broken picture frames. Each piece was examined, but nothing held William's gaze for long. Patience, however, did not go unrewarded. 11:47 p.m. One of the security officers froze, his hand trembling as it touched a small wooden box wedged in the farthest corner. Unlike the others, this box was compact, cloaked in a thick layer of dust, but its lid bore a clear label. Private, 997. The number struck the group silent. 1989, the year Diana died in the crash that haunted the world. This could not be coincidence. William strode forward. He gestured for the team to step back, taking the box himself. The rusty clasp was weak, snapping open with just a few motions. The lid creaked, unveiling a moment that those present would never forget. Inside, buried among scraps of paper and torn cloth, was a single black women's shoe, a finely crafted design, branded Jimmy Choo, manufactured in 1996. William bent closer, his eyes narrowing as recognition flared. He had seen it before, in photographs, in the French accident files. Yes, it was the same shoe, or rather, the missing half of the pair worn by Diana on her last night at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. The basement fell into suffocating silence. Heartbeats thundered, breaths quickened. William's grip tightened, fighting to contain the surge of emotion rising within him. Because if this truly was the missing shoe, then the entire narrative of 1997, the story the world had been told, was beginning to crack at its very foundation. According to the accident files, Diana was wearing a pair of black Jimmy Choo heels when she left the Ritz. After the horrific crash in the Alma Tunnel, rescue workers confirmed the shoes were still intact. Forensics recorded this detail clearly in their report. Yet somehow, after all the evidence was sealed, one shoe vanished without a trace. The French police archives never offered an explanation for its disappearance. And now, nearly 3 decades later, it has resurfaced. Not in Paris, but in the basement of a house once owned by Camilla. This was no coincidence. This was a shock. A silent yet razor-sharp accusation. William bent down, his hand trembling as he lifted the shoe from the box. He turned it under the beam of a flashlight. Every stitch, every tiny scuff matched perfectly with the forensic description from E7. The smell of aged leather, mixed with the dampness of the cellar, made the moment almost suffocating. No one spoke. Yet in their minds, the same question thundered. Why was Diana's shoe here? In that instant, speculation erupted. Had Camilla kept it as some kind of trophy? Or had someone deliberately placed it here to bury it away? Could there have been a hidden hand manipulating everything from the shadows, making Diana's death far more than just a tragic car crash? And then a colder thought seeped into William's mind. If the shoe was found inside Ray Mill House, it meant Camilla was, in some way, connected to concealing or tampering with evidence. The accusation was terrifying, but the proof lay right before his eyes. William drew in a deep breath. He knew this wasn't just a discovery that would rattle his family. This was something that could shake the entire world. The Jimmy Choo shoe, once nothing more than a fashion accessory, had now become the key to unlocking the darkest truth about the death of the mother he still mourned. The unspoken question burned in his mind. Who put this shoe here? Camilla? A loyal servant? Or a more shadowy force within the royal family itself? Each possibility cut into him like a knife. He remembered his mother, a Diana betrayed, isolated, and finally lost to a crash shrouded in mystery. He remembered the whispers that had lingered for years, that her death was never simple. And now, the evidence before him screamed that those suspicions were justified. One security officer broke the silence, his voice rough. "Your Highness, we need to seal this immediately. This is national-level evidence." William gave a faint nod, though his eyes never left the shoe. In that moment, he knew history would never be the same. But how had Diana's shoe ended up in Camilla's cellar? The answer was not in the present, but buried deep in the shadows of the past. To understand, we must return to the fateful summer of 1997, the very night when every thread of this dark web was first woven. On that late August night in 1980, Paris shimmered under its golden lights like any other evening. Yet it was destined to become one of the most defining moments in the history of the British monarchy. Princess Diana, the woman the world called the Queen of Hearts, was at the Ritz Hotel with her lover, Dodi Al-Fayed. Time was recorded with precision, and each moment has since stood as a grim milestone in a tragedy that shook the world. On the night of August 30th, 1997, at exactly 10:07 p.m., the doors of the Ritz Hotel swung open. Diana and Dodi stepped out, instantly engulfed by a storm of flashing cameras. That night, they chose a side exit, hoping to shake off the relentless paparazzi. But it was useless. The crowd was already waiting, shouting, shoving, desperate to capture what would become the final images of the world's most famous princess. In that fleeting moment, Diana looked tired, her eyes carrying a shadow of sorrow. She wore a graceful evening gown and a pair of black Jimmy Choo heels, a detail that, years later, would ignite controversies that never truly faded. At 11:23 p.m., just over an hour after leaving the Ritz, the Mercedes S280 carrying Diana and Dodi sped into the Alma Tunnel in Paris. At the wheel was Henri Paul, with bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones in the front. Hounded by paparazzi, the car was pushed far beyond the speed limit. Then came the moment of no return. The deafening crash tore through the still night by the River Seine. Metal crumpled into a twisted wreck, sparks and fire bursting from the front of the car. The world seemed to stop breathing. Dodi Al-Fayed died instantly. Henri Paul was gone too. Trevor Rees-Jones survived but was critically injured. Diana, the woman followed by millions of hearts, lay motionless inside the wreck, clinging to life. Emergency crews arrived within 10 minutes, fighting desperately to free her from the mangled steel. The forensic report later confirmed She still had a faint heartbeat when she was rushed to the PTA-Salpêtrière hospital. But after nearly 2 hours on the edge of death, at 4 a.m. August 31st, 1997, Diana finally slipped away. Her death was not just a personal loss, it was a collective wound. The world plunged into mourning. From Paris to London, people flooded the streets, weeping as if they had lost one of their own. Newspapers ran black-bordered headlines soaked in grief. The BBC broadcast news around the clock. CNN went live from France. Images of sorrow spread everywhere, carving a trauma that would linger for decades. The numbers alone showed the scale of Diana's impact. Over 2.5 billion people worldwide tuned in to watch her funeral, a record still unmatched. Outside Kensington Palace, more than 250,000 flowers were laid, transforming the gates into a sea of white blooms. Handwritten notes, ribbons, and makeshift tributes carried the raw emotion of humanity, mourning a woman who had lived and loved with unflinching honesty. And yet, along with the grief came endless questions. Why had a woman who had long voiced her fears of feeling unsafe inside the royal family died in such a crash? Was this truly a tragic accident, or the result of something far more orchestrated? The French police forensic report described in detail what Diana wore on that fatal night. Among the items listed were her black Jimmy Choo heels. But when the scene inventory was later made public, something was deeply unsettling. Photographs of the shoes were missing. The official record contained only a vague note that clothing and accessories were secured. The shoes themselves, the very pair she wore in her final hours, had vanished without explanation. That single detail unleashed a storm of conspiracy theories. Some journalists asked, did someone quietly remove the evidence that night in the Alma Tunnel? Others speculated, could those heels have held a clue so significant that someone wanted them gone? Or was it all just a case of chaotic misplacement in the aftermath of tragedy? Despite multiple inquiries in both France and Britain, the mysterious disappearance of Diana's shoes was never fully explained. The public was left with only chilling possibilities: that her heels had been deliberately hidden, locked away from the world as evidence no one dared to reveal. 2 decades passed, but the question never faded. Each anniversary of Diana's death, tabloids and mainstream media alike revisited the mystery of the missing heels. Some dismissed it as a clerical mistake. Others believed it was the key clue proving Diana's death was anything but simple. Then, in 2025, came a discovery so shocking it reignited every suspicion with unprecedented force. The very shoes thought to be lost forever resurfaced, not in Paris, not in police archives, but deep within the basement of Raymil House, the private residence long tied to Camilla. And once again, the chilling question echoed. How could evidence from a Paris crash site end up in Camilla's home? And perhaps even more disturbing, who put it there? If this truth were ever confirmed, it could tear apart the veil of silence that has hung for nearly 3 decades. It is not only about the mystery surrounding Diana's death, but also strikes at the very core of power and honor within the British royal family. And now, almost 30 years later, the answer may lie beneath Camilla's very own basement. 11:55 p.m. Inside the damp, Outspoken cellar of Raymil House, the air seemed frozen. A black heel, coated with a fine layer of dust, rested inside a wooden box marked Private 1997. The box had only been opened minutes before. Prince William stared at it, his eyes unable to accept the reality staring back at him. His whole body trembled, not from the chill in the air, but from the sheer weight of shock. Memories of that fateful night in Paris came rushing back in an instant. He drew in a long breath, then spoke firmly, coldly. Seal off the entire basement. No one leaves until I say so. The command stunned security officers and staff alike. This was not merely the reaction of a grieving son. This was the voice of the heir to the throne, a man confronting a secret that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Camilla rushed forward, her tone urgent yet trembling. It's just a collector's item. William, you've misunderstood. I don't know why it's here. She tried to remain composed, but each word betrayed her panic. No one in the room believed her. A shoe identical to the one from the 1997 Paris crash scene surfacing in her basement. It was far beyond coincidence. Charles, who had stood silently from the beginning, lowered his head, his hands tightly clasped. He neither moved to defend Camilla nor offered a word in her support. His face was lost in shadow. The portrait of a man cornered. Avoidance had become his instinct. The press, the public, even his own son, all eyes were now on Charles, waiting for him to speak. But he chose silence, a silence so heavy it darkened the entire room. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Harry was informed almost immediately. The younger brother, who had long believed Diana's death concealed truths never revealed, erupted in fury. "I warned you all. Everything I've ever said is now coming to light." His voice shook with anger during an urgent call. To him, the shoe was no mere artifact. It was living proof that his mother had been betrayed, proof that his suspicions all these years had not been unfounded. The media firestorm erupted within hours. As the news leaked, the hashtag #DianaTruth shot to #1 worldwide on Twitter. Over 500,000 shares in just 24 hours has turned the discovery into the single most discussed story on the planet. Images of the black shoe spread like wildfire, splashing across front pages from London to New York. Major broadcasters, BBC, CNN, Sky News, all launched rolling coverage, asking, is this a bizarre coincidence? Or evidence of a conspiracy buried for nearly 30 years? Public reaction split into two camps. Some argued it was nothing more than a mishap in storing personal items or antiques, urging people not to overreact. But the majority were outraged. Thousands of comments online demanded Camilla face the public. One user wrote, "If this shoe truly belonged to Diana, Camilla cannot escape suspicion. We deserve answers." Inside the royal family, the discovery was nothing short of a storm. William remained unyielding. He refused to let emotion cloud his judgment. The basement was sealed, and the scene handed over to a special investigation team. He knew that even the smallest misstep could bury the truth forever. Camilla, on the other hand, desperately pressed Charles to speak on her behalf. Yet the king's silence was like a knife to her chest. For if even Charles would not stand with her, she was left alone to face the tidal wave of public fury. To the British people, William suddenly became a symbol of resolve, a guardian of truth, battling against the shadows long cast over the monarchy. Media experts noted that in a single night, his image had been transformed. A son who dared to confront the truth about his mother's death, defying the quiet resistance within the palace, was exactly the figure the public had long been waiting for. Meanwhile, Harry did not hesitate to make his feelings public through the American press, where he now lives. He declared, if that shoe is real, then this is the proof I have been waiting for. The royal family must be held accountable. His words poured fuel on the fire, prompting the international media to dig even deeper into the scandal. That very night outside the gates of Raymell House, hundreds of reporters gathered, cameras pointed inward, waiting for an official statement, but all they were met with was complete silence. Security lights swept across the grounds, while inside, William remained with the investigation team, refusing to leave until every piece of evidence had been properly recorded. The tense atmosphere spread across the morning news bulletins the next day. A seasoned columnist for The Guardian wrote, "This is not just a shoe. This is a symbol of hidden truths, of questions that were never answered." And yet, after all the explosive reactions from both the public and the royal family, one haunting question still lingered. But what unsettled the public even more were the new theories that began to emerge. News of the shoe found in the basement of Raymell House spread like wildfire. Within hours, major outlets from London to New York splashed it across their front pages, while social media erupted with hundreds of thousands of comments. The hashtag #DianaTruth shot to the #1 spot worldwide, overtaking even major political stories. People debated endlessly, and in every word, every tweet, one chilling question surfaced. Where did that shoe really come from? As soon as a blurred photo of the black Jimmy Choo heel appeared on news sites, the public immediately linked it back to that fateful night in Paris in 1997. The French police's forensic report at the time had stated clearly, Diana was wearing a pair of black high heels, a design released in 1996. Yet during the investigation, those shoes were reported missing and were never mentioned again in the official files. And now, nearly 3 decades later, one of them had resurfaced, inside a property tied to Camilla, the woman long seen as the reason Diana's marriage collapsed. The first theory spread quickly, pushed heavily by the tabloids. Had Camilla kept the shoe as a trophy? At first glance, it sounded like a sensationalist script, but in the minds of many Britons who already disliked her, the idea carried weight. They believed that if Camilla had indeed kept the shoe since 1997, it would stand as a cruel reminder, a symbol of her bitter triumph over Diana. Talk show panels on BBC, Sky News, and even CNN repeatedly asked, who could hold on to such an item tied so closely to one of the world's greatest tragedies? But soon a second wave of speculation surfaced. Some royal experts argued that blaming Camilla directly was far too extreme. They suggested another possibility, that someone within the royal family or connected to them had placed the shoe at Mill House, using the property as a secret hiding place. In that scenario, Camilla herself would be just another pawn in a much larger, darker plan, thrust unwillingly into the storm of public outrage. This theory immediately rekindled old whispers from the late 1990s that Diana had been abandoned, that her accident was never just a random crash in a tunnel. A quick poll by YouGov, conducted only 2 days after the discovery, revealed a staggering figure. 62% of Britons believe that the truth behind Diana's death remains untold. The number reflected how deeply public trust in the monarchy had eroded. On morning radio shows, callers voiced their fury. If evidence has really been hidden for nearly 30 years, how can we believe anything Buckingham Palace says? One caller, his voice breaking, said, "This isn't just about Diana. It's about the truth that was stolen from us." Meanwhile, a third theory also gained traction, that the entire episode was a carefully staged attempt to destroy Camilla's reputation. Analysts writing for The Guardian and The Independent openly asked, could someone have planted the shoe there, knowing that once it was found, Camilla would instantly become the prime suspect in the public's eyes? If that scenario were true, then whoever orchestrated it must have had immense political or personal motives, because with one move, they could unravel decades of effort Camilla had poured into reshaping her image as queen. In the first days after the discovery, public anger rose like a tidal wave. Dozens of newspapers reported on small protests breaking out outside Buckingham Palace, where people carried photos of Diana alongside signs that read, "We want the truth." They weren't just demanding explanations. They were demanding justice for the woman once called the Queen of People's Hearts. Inside the royal family, confusion spread quickly. William was said to be under enormous strain. Harry erupted in fury, while Charles chose absolute silence. Each reaction, whether fierce or muted, only deepened the cloud of suspicion hanging over the monarchy. Against this backdrop, Charles's throne came under unprecedented pressure. Even newspapers traditionally loyal to the crown quietly began to ask, can a king at 76 truly reassure his people when his own family is drowning in shadows from the past? Some political analysts even warned that if this crisis of trust dragged on, it could directly threaten the very legitimacy of the monarchy itself. On social media, the public split into factions. Some believed Camilla stood at the center of the storm, the one who had hidden the truth for 3 decades. Others argued she was merely a victim, trapped in a larger conspiracy. And still, there were voices suggesting it was all coincidence, that a shoe had simply found its way to Mill House through reasons yet unknown. But amid this swirl of theories, one point united them all. The truth had never been revealed. These debates thickened the air across Britain. On television, commentators spoke of Diana with trembling voices, while forensic experts were invited to compare the recovered shoe with the original 1997 files. Every new detail, whether the leather, the brand, or the shape of the heel poured more fuel onto the fire. The public was gripped by a strange mix of dread and anticipation, as if each fragment of evidence was bringing a terrible mystery closer to light. Looking back at the unfolding chaos, it was clear that these three theories were more than idle gossip. They reflected the fear and fury of a society left without answers for far too long. A single shoe, an object so ordinary, so lifeless, had managed to reopen old wounds, shake the throne, and force the royal family into a defensive corner. So where does the truth lie? Was this an elaborate setup designed to bring Camilla down? Or the missing piece of a tragedy hidden for nearly 30 years? The question still hangs in the air, a shadow no one dares to touch. But one thing is certain, with public anger spreading, silence will no longer be an option for the royal family. If Diana were still alive, perhaps what she would wish for most would not be the unearthing of every secret, but simply the peace of watching her two sons grow into men. Yet truth, no matter how long it is buried, always finds a way to rise. And that shoe has become the spark for a storm unlike any the monarchy has ever faced. So, what do you think? Is this nothing more than a strange coincidence? Or is it proof that Camilla truly hid a devastating secret? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, this is Outspoken, the channel that takes you deep into the hidden corners of the British royal family that few dare to explore. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next.